so much for joining us for this episode of Leading Change. I'm Ema Roloff, and I've got Greg with me today, and we're going to be talking about finding the right balance between empathy and technology. Before I get to all the questions that I've got for you, can you give everybody an introduction?
Absolutely. My name is Greg Hamlin. I'm the Senior Vice President of Claims for Berkeley Industrial Comp. We're a WR Berkeley company that specializes in monoline workers' comp for high hazard jobs. So I always tell people, think of jobs where you could really hurt yourself, working at heights, working with explosives. Those are the kinds of jobs that we insure. And I've been in the industry for approaching 20 years. Currently live in Birmingham, Alabama, but am a Midwesterner by heart, although the South has been good to us. So I'm happy here as well. And I always tell people I'm a father of 6. So that's my badge of honor. We've got a busy house. There's always a million things going on, both at work and at home.
Thank you so much for joining me. And I like that you brought up your family as a part of the introduction as well, because it's such a big part of who we are.
Absolutely.
So I teased that we're going to be talking about empathy and technology. So I want to start with that idea of empathy. And when we were prepping for this conversation, you shared that your team has an empathetic resolution model that you use as a part of your claims process. Can you talk us through what that looks like?
Absolutely. So it's been about 5 years that I had been thinking about ways to change the way that we handle claims in workers' compensation. And there's been a push over the last, I don't know, maybe about the same amount of time for what some call a claims advocacy model. And there's some things I really like about that concept. Then there were some things that make it difficult to implement. And one of the pieces of that is how can, and this is the question I've been asking myself over the last 5 years, is how can we be truly an advocate for an injured worker when the policyholder is the one paying us the premium? So where's the balance in that? And I come from a family of social workers. My mom's a social worker. My brother-in-law is a social worker. My sister-in-law is a social worker. So anyway, and my family was a foster family growing up. So advocacy is a big deal to me. How do we find the balance of that? And where does that fit in insurance? And so one of the things that we've been exploring in our company is what we like to call our empathetic resolution model. And the concept there is if we look for ways to infuse empathy throughout the claims process with everybody involved, whether that's the hospital, the injured worker, the insured, that we will have better outcomes because people will feel more bought into our goal of helping the injured worker recover. So that's the concept. How we go about doing that is what we're working on now, is experimenting with different ways that we can infuse empathy in the process of claims.
What has the response to this model been? Because one thing that I think is really fascinating, and maybe we'll get to this a little bit further along in the conversation, is I have been hearing these statistics coming from groups like JD Power that empathy isn't as big of a part of what claims it used to be. It's not as large of a component, and that customers aren't syncing that empathetic experience the same way. So I'd be curious to hear what the response has been to this approach from your end.
It's been really positive. And obviously, we're in the early stages of this experiment, but think of the examples. I think maybe other forms of claims may be different, but when you're talking with somebody who's been hurt, and if you can think of any time that you've been hurt or someone you know has been hurt, that's generally a pretty emotional time for the injured worker and their family. And so finding ways to connect with everybody involved, the employer is also in a situation where they have somebody who's off work. They have a job to do and that person's not there now. And they are also concerned about their long-term premiums. So there's a lot of strings tugging in different directions in workers' compensation. And some of the little things that we started doing, one example is we made a deal with Cheryl's Cookies where we can send cookies to the injured worker and their family when they've had surgery or they're coming home from the hospital. Those little touches have been a big deal. We've had injured workers call us up in tears, blue collar workers. One guy in particular had said, nobody's ever sent me anything until now. And the hope is that in doing this, we can gain cooperation to achieve better outcomes. Because we know that when an injured worker is engaged in their own recovery, they're going to achieve better outcomes in the long run than us pushing them along or the doctor pulling them along.
To bring it full circle, I talked about empathy and technology And the whole show is about digital transformation. So I do need to bring it back forward. But I think that can you talk a little bit about how technology has really made your team have the availability to focus on this type of behavior and really working to foster that collaboration and cooperation with the insured?
Absolutely. So one of the things that and technology does really well is streamlining processes. And so one of the things in claims in general, there are lots of processes to processing a claim, to paying a bill, to how we onboard our insureds, to all of the steps throughout that process. One of the things that computers don't do a really good job at is building relationships of trust and showing empathy. So one of the things we've been trying to do is leverage the things that we're doing now that are still more based on processes and find ways to use technology to improve those. One of the things we did about 2 or 3 years ago is we eliminated the traditional admin roles that you would think of in an insurance company. And we created what we call our business engagement team, which has many interns on it, as well as new employees who are looking to further their career in insurance. And the idea there was to, one, cross-train across different disciplines, underwriting and workers' comp, or underwriting and claims, so that they could learn the different pieces of the business, but also to look at processes and things that we could do different, better, smarter, so that they could spend the time to talk to our policyholders, to talk to our injured workers, and to build those relationships of trust. One example, when we onboarded our policyholders originally, we would send them 3-ring binders that we'd mail to them that had all of the information on how to file a claim and different information about our company and how everything works in workers' compensation in their particular jurisdiction. And workers' comp has 50 different versions of that because every state has their own rules and statutes. So that had to be different for every state. One of the things we decided to do in this process is we actually made all of that digital, so that our injured workers and our policyholders can access that information online. And we don't have 3-ring notebooks that we're having to put together, assemble, mail out, and then are probably sitting on someone's desk somewhere collecting dust. We actually have those resources now available. So looking for ways to change some of the admin tasks to ways that are smarter, better, faster, so that we can then take those tasks and switch them into jobs that build trust, that help to build empathy with all those who are involved in the process.
I hope that this conversation inspires everybody to think a little bit through how technology can actually help us become more human, because I think that's ultimately the goal of what we're looking to do is hand off, just like you were talking about, those processes that we can streamline, that we can automate, to technology, so that we can focus on the part that's people to people and the part that really matters, especially within the insurance industry.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I always give people the example. I think recently I had a situation where I needed to call. I was billed incorrectly on something and I had to press 3 and press 9. I got transferred to somebody. They couldn't help me. They transferred me to somebody else. They couldn't help me. I had to be called back by the supervisor. The supervisor couldn't find my information. Anyway, long story short, by then you're so frustrated at the end of that experience that my best self was not on display. And if you add to that somebody who's been hurt and they actually are dealing with pain while they're going through that experience, it's no wonder that they're frustrated. And when you're frustrated and you don't feel like you're getting the help they need, you're going to litigate. You're going to go find an attorney because you feel like you're being treated unfairly. And I think if we can do the right thing first and treat people the way we would want to be treated, it goes a long way. And as I mentioned, I'm a father of 6 kids. I feel like there's times that you need to be firm, but those pats on the back, those relationships matter. Grew up in a foster family, and I mentioned all the social workers in my family. Those things go a long way. If we can just take time to listen, I think we can do better. And that's our plan.
Thank you so much for joining me and sharing a little bit about your guys' strategy to really, again, humanize the process. If you're not already, make sure you make your way over to Greg's LinkedIn and give him a follow there. But have a wonderful day, everybody, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Emma.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Leading Change. If you liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe and come back weekly for more expert interviews on digital transformation, change management, and emerging technologies.